We are back in the Hafter High School Media Labs, and we are learning the Sefer Pituchei Chotam. I'd like to thank my producer, Caleb Gassner. Thank you so much. Here we go. It is Parshas Pekudai. Today, as we finish Sefer Shemais, I'd like to give a little shout out to the Art Scroll edition of the Sefer Pituchei Chotam, which is in English, which I've used in help preparing the shiurim, and to the Hebrew edition. And there's actually a brand new edition. If you can see that, this was put out very recently by Rabbi David in Nahariya. A beautiful collection of the Svarim, written over a little differently, but they do a fantastic idea. It's called Penine Abir Yaakov Al HaTorah. I highly recommend it. All right, here we go. Parshas Pekudai. Let's talk about Mei Brachos. So the pasuk tells us, "Vayihi ma'as kikar kesef." So they collected 100 talents of silver. They were used latsekes as adnei hakodesh, as adnei brachos. They were used for casting the sockets of the kodesh, the sanctuary, and of the curtain. Ma'as adanim l'ma'as kikar. There were 100 sockets to the 100 talents. And that means it was a kikar la'adan, a talent per socket. Here we go. Fantastic. That is what was brought in the collection for the building of the Mishkan. So Rabbi Yaakov sees in these psukim a beautiful remez to this idea that David HaMelech was misaken for us. Tanya Hayu Remeir Omer Chayiv Adam Levarach Meya Brachos B'chol Yom. A person has to make 100 brachas every day. And it's darshan from a pasuk, V'ato Yisrael, Ma Hashem Elkecha Shel Me'imach. Now, Jewish people, what does Hashem ask from you? The word Ma can be read as Meya. So what Hashem asks from you is to make Meya brachas, to make 100 brachas a day. Now, on a regular day, if you're davening 3 times a day, and you're having meal and you're benching, so generally you get pretty close to 100 brachas. There is you can count it. Shabbos, Yom Tov is a little more difficult. That's why we like to make a Shabbos party. That's where the makar comes from, to make extra brachas. We want to make 100 brachas every day. Now, when you make a bracha, there are 3 types of brachas you can make. The Rambam writes, Nimtzu kol brachas kulan. Of all the brachas, they fall into 3 categories. Shleishim minim. There are 3 categories of brachas. The brachas hanaya, a bracha that you make when you're enjoying something. That's like when you eat, when you drink, when you smell. Those are brachas of hana. When we benefit, we want to thank Hashem. Then there's brachas hamitzvahs before we do a mitzvah, and there's brachas haidah that we would do in davening. Shein derech shevach v'aidah v'akasha, and these are all to remember constantly HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the basic idea of the Mei Brachos, is that whatever we're doing throughout the day, we're always remembering where this comes from. We want to constantly remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and liyiremenu, and to be in awe of Him. Now, the ikar of every bracha is really when we say Hashem's name. We say Baruch Atah Hashem. We say Hashem's name in a bracha, and that's the idea, the liyiremenu, that we should be in a state of awe. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right here; He's with us. Now, when it's interesting, because we all know when we say Hashem's bracha, it's spelled one way, and we pronounce it a different way. It's spelled Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem Havaya, but we don't say that name. We're not allowed to, and we actually pronounce it with the Shem Adnus, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Now the question is, okay, well, what am I supposed to have in mind when I say the bracha? Baruch Atah Hashem. When I say Adnus means Hashem is the master of the whole world. The Shem Havaya is a different meaning, and that means that we're supposed to the intent we have with the Shem Havaya is Haya Hayva V'yiyah. Hashem is eternal; He always was and always will be. Or He's Havaya, His existence. True existence is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what are you supposed to have in mind? So Shulchan Aruch actually talks about this in Siman Hey, and he says Yechavin be'berachas pir shamilas. You're supposed to know what you're saying when you make a bracha. And Kishiyazkir Hashem, when you say Hashem's name, Yechavin Pirish Kriasei Ba'adnas. You should have in mind the way we say it, and that's that Hashem is Adon HaKol, the master of everything. V'yechavim b'ksivasei. You should also have in mind the way it's written, b'yud hey, that Hashem is Haya, Hayve, V'yiyah. So he says you're supposed to have both in mind whenever you make a bracha. And that is actually what the Kaf HaChaim paskins like that as well. And he says, Al pi chachmei ha'emes. That means according to Kabbalah. La'olam yechaven shemes elu. You should have both of these in mind. And he says there's a special way you do that. There's an excellent exercise you can try, is actually when you make a bracha, to visualize the letters that you're saying. And when you get to the Shem Hashem, when you say Baruch Atah Hashem, to visualize that. And now what should you visualize? So he says you should visualize both, but not separately. You should actually think Yud, Aleph, Hey, Dalet, Vav, Nun, Hey, Yud, which if you look at that, you'll see it's Yud, K, Vav, K, but interspersed with the Shem Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. They're combined together. Okay, now when you combine these, the Kaf HaChaim does it one way. You could have done it a different way. You could have put Aleph and then a Yud and then Dalet then a Hey. But the Kaf HaChaim says that the Yud goes first. Yud Ke Vav Ke goes first. That's how the Kaf HaChaim passes. The Mishnah Berurah brings the Gra that says, except during Shema, or you only have to have in mind the way we read it. But the Abir Yaakov, Pituchei Chotam, Rabbi Yaakov says, no, you got to do like the Kaf HaChaim, and he's going to show a Remez to this in the pasuk. So let's take a look at the pasuk. We continue. One more piece of introduction. We know we've learned many times that the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke can be spelled out like every other word. Can be spelled b'mila. It means it can be filled, and there are many ways you can fill the Shem Havaya. It could be filled with a Yud, so you can spell Yud Hey. And then Hey could be spelled Hey Yud, and the Vav could be spelled Vav Yud Vav, and the last Hey again is Hey Yud. It could be spelled with Heys, meaning you fill up the Hey with a Hey Hey, or you could spell a Hey with an Aleph. Right? There are different miluyim of the Shem Hashem. They have different gematrias. So there's a Shem of Ayin Beis, which means if you spell it with Yuds, the gematria of Yud Ke Vav Ke, spelled out, b'milui, actually equals Ayin Beis, 72. That's called the Shem Ayin Beis. Now, the Shem Ayin Beis, if you look at it, has 4 Yudin in it. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Each letter has spelled out, has a Yud in it. Now, Yud equals 10. Now, in Api Kabbalah, there are 10 spheres, and each one of those, each 10 is filled by another 10. Because let's say I go through the spheres of Chachma, Bina, and Das, or Keser, Chachma, and Bina. And now in Keser, you have all of the Eser spheres. So 10 is actually made up of another 10. Okay, just as a reference that, like when we count spheres Sa'imer, we talk about Chesed and then Chesed Shebegvura. So they're 10. There it's only a count of 7, but they're 10 in every 10. So that means 10 actually equals 100. So the milui of the Shem Havaya, spelled out with Yuds, has 4 Yuds, which actually give us 400. Okay. Hold that for a minute. There's another form of gematria called Hakar, which is multiplication. And if you take the other 2 names of Hashem, meaning the Shem Havaya is spelled out with the Alephes, and the Shem Havaya, that would spell out Yud Hey Vav Hey as such. That's called the Shem Ben. The gematria that's the Shem Ma. The Shem that equals 45 is Yud Hey Vav Hey spelled out with Alephes. And then there's the Shem Ben, which is 52, which is Yud Hey spelled out with Hey, Hey, and then the Vav has nothing in between. That equals 52. If you wanted to put these 2 names together, the way you would write it would be Yud Hey. That's one way to do it. And then Vav Hey is the other way. Now, if you multiply Yud Hey times each other, that would be 20 times 6 would give you 120. And if you take the Vav Hey spelled like that, so that would give you 12 times 10, that would give you 120. So each one would give you 120 together, that would give you 240. Okay, so we have 2 numbers to keep in mind here. And these are different shiluvim, different ways of adding up the Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya Mili Yudin will give you 4 Yudin, which give you 400. And the Shem Ma and the Shem Ben combined together will give you 240. Now, what does that do for us? The word Kikar HaKesef, which is prevalent in this pasuk, the Kikar HaKesef, the talent of silver. Kikar Kesef equals 400. Kikar itself equals 240. That means in this Kikar Kesef, I have the milui of the Shem Havaya, or a formation of the Shem Havaya in three different ways. Three different ways, a remez to the Shem Havaya in the words Kikar Kesef in three ways. Kikar Kesef is 400. Kikar, right, that's the milui of Ayin Beis with 4 Yudin, and then the Kikar itself has partially the Shema and partially the Shem Ben. Gewaldig. Now, let's take a look at the pasuk. Vayi ma'as kikar kesef. Remember, vayi ma'as, the 100. The 100 is a remez to the mea brachos. Now, when I make mea brachos, the ikar of the bracha is the Shem Havaya, the Shem Hashem, which is in the bracha. So when I'm making the brachos, there's a kavana I need to have. The kavana is kikar kesef. That's the Shem Havaya in its different forms, either the 4 Yudin, which give equal Kikar Kesef, or Kikar being 240, the combination of the Shema and the Shem Ben. That's the kavana when I say the Shem Hashem. Now, what do I do with these things? Now, it's not just the Shema, I don't even say the Shem Havaya. What Shem do I actually say? I say Aleph Dal Nun Yud. Says the pasuk, Latsekes, take the Kikar Kesef, and I'm going to use it Latsekes, to cast, as Adnei HaKodesh, as Adnei HaPareches. I want to put that together. I want to cast that Kikar Kesef, the Shem Havaya, into the Shem of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, into Adnos. Now, the different types of brachas we have, as we mentioned before. The Adnei Kodesh represent the brachas that I make of Kedusha. When I'm davening, when I'm doing a mitzvah, there's one type of a Shem Hashem. And I might think, you know what? Maybe it's only when I'm doing, holy things. So when I make a bracha on something holy, I should have the kavana when I make the bracha. But when I'm eating for my own pleasure, so maybe I don't have to have such kavana when I make a bracha. Adnei pareches, spelled as such with a vav, pareches, plus the 10 letters equals 787. Birchas Hanenin equals 787. Birchas Hanenin means brachas that I make when I'm taking pleasure from something. So says Rabbi Yaakov, it's not enough to have kavana of the shiluv of the Shem Havaya with the Shem Adnos for Adnei Kodesh, but also for the Adnei Pareches, for Birchas Hanenin also. Any type of bracha you make, you want to have kavana. Me'as Adanim le'Me'as Hakikar. For every adnos, for the me'as adanim, every bracha, every one of those 100 brachas that you're having the Shem Adnos, don't forget, just because you're saying Aleph Dal Nun Yud, when you say it, don't forget the kavana of the kikar, of the Shem Havaya. Now you want to know, well, which one goes first? How am I mishal? How do I put that first? Is it Yud Aleph, when I'm spelling out the Yud Kei Vav Kei and then Adnos, or maybe Adnos should go first? Says Rabbi Yaakov, well, that's why that pasuk, which seems superfluous, it tells you that there's a kikar la'aden. Every socket was made up of a kikar. But what comes first? The kikar precedes the adain. The Shem Havaya comes before the Shem Adnos. So Rabbi Yaakov gives us here, first of all, a beautiful remez to the minhag of the Sfardim, that every time they say Hashem's name, like the Mechaber Paskins, they have the kavana and of being mashaliv, of putting together the Yud Kei Vav Kei and the Shem Adnos, and having the Shem Havaya first, a beautiful remez to this in this pasuk. But more than that, it gives us a chizuk that every time we make a bracha, it's not stam. Every bracha is special and a kavana. Try it once. When you're making a bracha, you're making a shahakal, whatever you're going to be eating. I'm telling you, if you have this kavana in mind when you're making the bracha, you picture these letters, you're eating, your whole experience will be different. Have an awesome Shabbos.